feeling dependent on the government. The government doesn't fix my play area. Well, they're bad people and there's nothing that I could do as a citizen to fix my play area. And that kind of thinking has to change. I was telling you I was involved in some candidate education on Thursday and Friday. And I had to explain to a lady that when you become a candidate, your job is not just to listen to the complaints or the concerns of your constituency, but when it comes, you have to actually do something about it. So if somebody wants street lights in their area, you're going to have to create the project to get that done. It's not about you telling us, in her words, I'm going to tell the bigger bosses that my people need street lights and my bigger bosses are going to take care of the problem. I said, no, the bigger boss is now you. You have to figure out how to get that done.
Responsibility. And so pray you want to take a stab at that. Why should we really be having these kinds of conversations now?
I think first of all, I must compliment you on starting this series of discussion on this topic, because I think by us sitting here and exchanging ideas, we are going to help a lot of people who need to get their ideas crystallized as to how they can help. I've been involved in Guyana from the very early 90s, and I have probably lived through some of the most horrible occurrences in Guyana since then. And one of the things that, having gone through and been in situations where one witnessed all of that go throughout the years, I found myself in a position where, you would look at people who were totally helpless, looking at you to say to you, well, what are you going to do about it? At that time, looking into the future, I didn't know how things would change in Guyana. And I felt very powerless, because here you are going to commiserate with people who are in great grief or poverty or some other catastrophe. And, it was always just at a political level. You had to say to them, look, let's hope things change or whatever. And to me, I had perhaps a little light bulb moment. And as Renata just touched on that subject, I realized that I was not going to allow politicians or politics to dictate what I wanted to do personally for the people of Guyana. And that is to improve their lot and their condition. And so I took it upon myself to not just function in a purely political environment, but to begin this nonprofit trust, which has been able to reach out and do a lot of projects in women's empowerment, youth empowerment, village renewal. And we've been trying to head up this whole crisis of suicide. We've been trying to do a lot of work to educate people in the country and to get over the scourge of suicide. So I agree entirely with what Renata said, and that is that for all these years, we've asked for servant leadership in Guyana. And right now, as I think this is what you're referring to, your discussion with Mr. Harmon, we've asked for that, and we've hoped that we would have a government that would do the job that they're entitled to do. But we can't sit back and just wait for them to do everything and to put everything on the table. I think the time has come now where they need to do the job that they have to do, which is to prepare the environment, prepare the country, clear up a lot of the stuff that needs to be fixed. They must engage themselves 100% in that right now, and they have their hands full because what they are facing there is not easy. And so I think the more of us out here in the world, in Guyana, even friends of Guyana, the more of us that get up and say, okay, fine, let us examine what it is we want to do, and let us try to find an avenue to get it done. I have a foundation, yes, the Guyana Foundation, and I'll tell you that, I mean, we can't go into the whole foundation right now because time doesn't permit, but one of the things I've noticed is that so many people reach out to work through the foundation to get into the communities and villages to help. And so I'm very, very encouraged by that, because I'm beginning to see that movement that Renata is speaking of. I'm beginning to see it, albeit slowly. People are beginning to get up and say, okay, look, I want to help my village of Anna Regina or wash clothes Myconi or whatever, they're beginning to get up and now engage through the foundation to help.
Mark,
anyway, I don't want to go on too much.
that's all right. Mark, you want to jump in here?
Sure. First of all, Selwyn, thank you very much for making this possible, and greetings to all the fellow panelists. It's my first time actually engaging with you, so it's a pleasure. Um, I, I have a problem with the term development. Forgive me if I'm if I go down the theoretical road here, because it still has this monolithical kind of approach where it has to be government centered. And I think one of your panelists touched on a very good point, which said that there is this tendency, and there has been a continuous tendency to feel that the government is responsible for is responsible for the progress of a community. And I would like to decenter that for a moment and say that these things are already happening, regardless of the movements that have been happening within the political strata. I think what is happening is that when we are having these discourses talking about national policy, there isn't enough attention being paid to what is actually going on. For a great example, even as of today, right, in spaces in South Kupununi, there are talks that are happening with Chief Tony James and so on, who are looking at indigenous land rights as a premise for their interpretation of this national term called development. And I think when do we start looking at this question, and it's a very good question that you're posing, I think we have to take a step back and look at what is already going on and then start readdressing the question, because this is a very heavy and very dense term, development. Furthermore, I would like to reiterate what one of your previous panelists was talking about in terms of this notion that development is a fix to infrastructure and on foreign direct investments. Don't get me wrong, I do believe that there is need for basic infrastructure. However, we have to really address, as well as people being in the diaspora or moving and traversing back and forth, what does that imagery look like in our head that we're striving towards? I mean, are we really going for a Georgia that looks like Dubai? Really? I have a problem with that. I have a fundamental problem with that. I had a very good friend of mine sent me some ideas of some policy drafting that is happening in Guyana. And there is even no premise for community gardens or backyard gardens, rooftop gardens.
Correct.
If you look specifically at what developed, developed countries are doing, say, for example, France, they are actually taking various steps back into community projects. They are not looking at national development strategies anymore because it's not working. It's too broad. It doesn't really address the stuff that is ongoing. So I am just trying to bring that in here because I think sometimes if we don't bring in those types of themes into these talks, it'll be very circular constantly. And what you might find is a constant reiteration of topics that sometimes becomes government politique. It's government speak. So those are my 2 cents for now.
But Mark, while I have you there, you're a food advocate, natural food, and how
okay.
how do you see yourself? I have 2 questions for you. I'm going to ask you the second one a little after Colin comes in. But this one I want you to answer. How do you see yourself in your capacity contributing to moving Guyana forward?
Well, first of all, I do not want to move Guyana forward. That's not my place. That's too broad of a question.
Mark, if this afternoon you're gonna anchor me to semantics, we are gonna go up the road.
Let me build my answer.
All right, good. All right.
I do not want to move Guyana forward because it's too broad of a question to engage with. Now, if you were to ask me how I'm looking at my village, that is something that is a better question to engage with, because this is the problem that I'm trying to highlight here. National policy sometimes tends to overlook what the small individual voices are saying. Now, in terms of answering your question more specifically, it's already happening, Selwyn. It's not that because of this, we get caught up in this frame where there was a necessary change in government. Obviously, I agree with that. What is happening now, some are very skeptical of some of the policies that are being implemented. I agree with that as well. But what is going under the radar here is that the diaspora has already been doing work in various parts of their various respective communities, irrespective of this national move to make Guyana better and so on. And I mean, if you want to talk economics, just look at the Observatory of Economic Complexity at MIT. That has done some very serious work looking at traces of remittances coming from the diaspora into targeted spaces in Guyana.
Mark,
All right, and
let me get Colin. Let me get Colin here. When you get back, I want you to answer my question. I'm going to put you on the spot here, right, Colin? I'm going to ask the same question of you that I asked of Mark. I'm going to get him. The question is, how do you see you in your capacity helping or contributing to moving Guyana forward?
Well, I want to say it's a pleasure to be back on the show, and it's also good to meet up with new friends, Priya, Mark, and Renata. As a youth of Guyana, I share a perspective that we need to put all of our emphasis on using the energies that we have as young people in Guyana to move Guyana forward.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being is that we have a lot to offer. And I just want to draw on my recent experience. I went to Barbados a few weeks ago, and I saw that they have these coconuts. They're using the husk of coconuts, and they're making a whole lot of stuff with it. But I know sometimes when I travel along, the East Bank or East Coast of Guyana, I see that they're throwing away all these coconut husks. And these things are going for about 20, 25 Bajan dollars, which is about 12 US dollars. Here I'm saying that we have unique opportunities to create new things. That's an industry by itself that we can move into and harness. Mm-hmm. Barbados have, and recently our President Granger, and I was happy that like we had this light bulb moment where both of us were thinking about the same thing. He was talking in Kildonan about the Six Sisters, or traditionally rice, sugar, and all that stuff. But for instance, now we have Wales is being closed down. Why now we can use this opportunity to push in on traditional crops like watermelons? There's a whole set of things. Irish potatoes. I know on the Canadians are coming and they're pushing for a lot of these things. So I see Guyana as a booming country, a lot of potential. And my real contribution is to be able to harness it in whatever area I can. My specialty is in health, but I think that there's so much more that we can do and so much more we can work
on. Hold on a second. Somebody in the chat room is claiming that audio went. Is this still the case?
I can hear you clearly.
You can hear.
I can hear you clearly.
All right.
I'm hearing you.
Okay. I just want to make sure that the chat room. Renata, well, I know Supriya traveled back and forth. So, well, as a matter of fact, this whole panel traveled back and forth.
I want to pick up on something that was it Michael said about we have to first define what development.
Mark.
Yeah. Mark.
Yes.
Right. For since I was a wee babe, I've been hearing that Guyana is possibly the breadbasket of the Caribbean. Now let's take that as probably the big picture. It's the big goal for Guyana. And we want to look at, for instance, how do we achieve that? In the 50 years that Guyana has been an independent nation, forgive me, but I don't think we've made much progress or, let's say, sustained progress towards meeting that goal. The Caribbean imports a stupendous amount of food from North America into our region. And yet we are here sitting on this part, in this corner of the Caribbean, saying that we are the potential breadbasket of the Caribbean. When we haven't fixed, we have not, our agriculture has remained the same way. Since my father was a boy, we're still planting rice in the same way. sugarcane is still in the hands of Gaisuka, which has done, not such a brilliant job at managing it. Lots of small farmers are still doing farming in the same way, getting the same sort of low yields. And bottom line is that we haven't really strategically looked at, if this is our big goal picture, what are we going to do to get to it? Now, I'm not saying that I'm advocating for big farms, which is what somebody had said a couple of years ago. But if we take the same small village economies and decided, okay, every village is going to be contributing to this goal, and we are going to make sure that we facilitate it as government, the best way that they can do it, the most efficient way that they can get it done, and we can all move ourselves towards this goal of being the food basket of the Caribbean, then I can say that is development that I can get on board with.
Mark.
Let me put something into this for a moment. One, Renata, I really like what you're coming with there. And Colin, you gave a great point with what President Granger was addressing with breadfruit, which is, quite an interesting point on its own, because that is actually traced back to Kwame Nkrumah's policy in Ghana. One of the things that I really think needs to be addressed is, look, the term that Renata is using about Guyana with large-scale agriculture being mentioned only a few years ago, it's actually being reiterated now in contemporary agriculture policy from the Ministry of Agriculture, who is really pushing. The ministry is actually pushing for large-scale soy and rice agriculture to be done in the Rupununi Basin.
Right.
And I have some serious issues with it because, for one, that type of production, even though stylistically it looks appealing, what it's really doing is damaging not only the space itself, but in terms of employment, it is not providing a sustainable level of employment for people in the area. What you're talking about is mechanized production. So this is the thing that I am really working on right now, is what Renata was touching on. How do we look at small community production that is happening in small communities, that is going on right now, and harness that type of level and pull into tapping into what the Caribbean, the potential Caribbean market, right? Now, let's look at it through the lens of cassava. Right now, China is touting around a lot of money for raised levels of cassava production. The question that comes into play is that, okay, it's stereotypical to assume that indigenous communities are just bowling over the seams with cassava, and they want to get it off their hands as much as possible, which might not necessarily be true. But normally, what is the problem here is that the approach to increasing cassava yields is actually giving out contracts to a large-scale cassava producer. So you see, there is a counterbalance in terms of the approach that. Sorry, I'm using my hands here, but there's a counterbalance in the approach of what we're defining food development. I'm going to stick in that parameter there. Within Guyana's framework, there is still this propensity to depend on large-scale industry as a means of developing, quotes, Guyana's food sector. And I firmly believe, and I can give you tons of statistics if it's necessary, to show that this is not the trajectory of where the global economy is heading towards. A lot of major states right now are shifting back into small-scale rural production. Anyways, I'm taking up too much space here, so I'll leave you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
I wanted to briefly touch on Mark's point with the Rupununi and the soya. I think that's a bad idea, and I know Mark will agree with me that soy takes a lot of water.
Sorry, Colin, could you repeat that? You broke up.
I was saying that soy takes a lot of water, lots of water, to grow and to harvest. It's almost the same like rice. We have the land in Rupununi, but I think, one of the things that the Rupununi is known well for is the cattle and the meat that we get there. Why don't we have like a cheese plant there? Why don't we have turn Rupununi into this big dairy area where we can supply cheese to the world, we can supply meat to Guyana, to the Caribbean. I am not big on reinventing the wheel. But what I'm big about is using what we have and upscale and scaling it up, and also bringing in the latest science and technology. I think that, even we're talking about rice, we're probably about 20, 30 years behind rice production, because rice now has gotten very technical with research and science. I went to the Philippines and I saw how they grow rice there under these very, very scientific methods. And Guyana is a partner with them. So why don't we partner with the National Rice Research Institute, Erie, and move our Guyana yields of rice into 21st century, encourage our farmers. Also, we need to update our methods of production, drying rice, all these things. So I feel that we have so much to do with what we have right now. I really don't think that we need to be trying to reinvent stuff, but mostly look how we can produce, or we can expand what we have now.
If I may